last night, President Trump plunged the country into chaos without a shred of warning. The Trump administration announced a halt to virtually all federal funds across the country. In an instant, Donald Trump has shut off billions, perhaps trillions of dollars that directly support states, cities, towns, schools, hospitals, small businesses, and most of all, American families. This is a dagger at the heart of the average American family in red states, in blue states, in cities, in suburbs, in rural areas. It is just outrageous. Funds for things like disaster assistance, local law enforcement, rural hospitals, aid to the elderly, food for people in need, all are on the chopping block in this new administration. Why? They need tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy, and these cuts, they think, will fund them. And just like the January 6th pardons, this decision is lawless, dangerous, destructive, cruel. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. This, plain and simple, this is Project 2025. Project 2025 by another name. They knew how unpopular Project 2025 was, but the right-wing ideologues are still in control. So they had to do it in a different way, but it has the same consequences and will have the same horrible, negative, overwhelming reaction. And what does Vogt want to do? Well, you saw it in his blueprint, Project 2025. Eradicate basic services, eradicate investments that help tens of millions of Americans, all so they can pay for the tax cuts for the ultra-rich. It's hard to overstate how destructive this decision is for the country. He has a lot of really bad decisions for which the American people will rebel, and politically is going to be very unpopular. But this is the worst of the worst. This is a heist done on a national scale. No matter how much he may believe he does, the president does not have the authority to ignore the law, and we're going to fight this in every way that we can.
So I am urging the Senate Budget Committee Chair, Lindsey Graham, a fellow appropriator, to hold Russ Vogt's nomination that was supposed to occur this Thursday. Republicans should not advance that nomination out of committee until the Trump administration follows the law.
This is not a blanket pause on federal assistance and grant programs from the Trump administration. Individual assistance, that includes, I'm not naming everything that's included, but just to give you a few examples, Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause. And I want to make that very clear to any Americans who are watching at home who may be a little bit confused about some of the media reporting. This administration, if you are receiving individual assistance from the federal government, you will still continue to receive that. It is the responsibility of this president and this administration to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. That is something that President Trump campaigned on. That's why he has launched DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, who is working alongside OMB. And that's why OMB sent out this memo last night, because the president signed an executive order directing OMB to do just this. And the reason for this is to ensure that every penny that is going out the door is not conflicting with the executive orders and actions that this president has taken. It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for the Green New scam that has cost American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy and agencies. No more funding for Green New Deal social engineering policies. Again, people who are receiving individual assistance, you will continue to receive that. And President Trump is looking out for you by issuing this pause because he is being good steward of your taxpayer dollars. It is a temporary pause, and the Office of Management and Budget is reviewing the federal funding that has been going out the door. Again, not for individual assistance, but for all of these other programs that I mentioned. think this is a very responsible measure. Again, the past 4 years, we've seen the Biden administration spend money like drunken sailors. It's a big reason we've had an inflation crisis in this country, and it's incumbent upon this administration to make sure, again, that every penny is being accounted for honestly.
Medicaid, is that affected?
I gave you a list of examples: Social Security, Medicare, welfare benefits, food stamps that will not be impacted by this federal pause. I can get you the full list after this briefing from the Office of Management and Budget.
So I think the organizing idea here is that the White House doesn't want the federal government to be spending money to support programs to which President Trump is opposed. And the problem with that is that that's not his call. Under the Constitution, the way the appropriations power works is it belongs to Congress, not the president. If the president could decide not to spend whatever money he doesn't want to spend, then there's not much point in having a Congress at that point. And so, even if folks were sympathetic in the abstract to the idea that maybe there are a few programs where it's not quite fair to make the president have to spend money he's opposed to spending, this is not a scalpel. This is a nuclear-tipped broadsword. And to allow this kind of program to go forward would not just have immediate, harsh, deleterious effects on all kinds of segments of society. It would really pretty radically reorient the separation of powers in this country away from the legislature and toward the executive. I think one or both of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to see the administration just further walk back and walk back and walk back this policy until it's not much of anything, or it's going to lose in court. I mean, even as the courts have become more sympathetic to claims of executive power, including the Supreme Court as recently as last summer in the presidential immunity case, the appropriations power, Congress's power of the purse, has been the one real sort of untouchable part of Congress's constitutional prerogative. And I think, courts from across the ideological spectrum, courts across the country, the U.S. Supreme Court, if and when we get there, are going to be pretty darn skeptical of an effort by a president to just so categorically try to get out from underneath Congress's biggest, most important, and most clearly Congress's constitutional power. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about literally tens of billions of dollars, money that goes to, everything from funding cancer research to funding school lunch programs to funding, student loans. Now, the Office of Management and Budget has since tried to clarify that some of that stuff is not covered by the memo, although the ambiguity is itself a problem. But the reality is that, federal financial assistance, federal money, is in just about all of our lives in some way, shape, or form, supporting our local emergency room, supporting our local colleges and universities, providing access to healthcare. I mean, you name it, helping our local governments and our state governments to rebuild our roads. And so everywhere you look, there is some kind of federal financial assistance. And here we have the Trump administration not just turning off the tap, but doing so really for no reason other than to give it time to decide if it wants to turn the tap back on. Even when prior presidents have claimed narrower powers to impound appropriated funds, it's never been for these kinds of, loose, amorphous, unspecific policy reasons. So impoundment is a claim that the president is entitled to decline to spend money that Congress has appropriated. We should note, on Tuesday, the administration claimed that this is not an impoundment because it's temporary. That's really a non sequitur. I mean, impoundment historically has meant any context in which the executive branch is refusing to spend money Congress has appropriated. And indeed, there's a 1974 statute, the Impoundment Control Act, that specifically provides a mechanism through which the president can temporarily defer payments. That's not the process that the Trump administration is following here. So this seems pretty clearly to be an impoundment, and I think even more problematically, an impoundment that is not consistent with the 1974 Act.